Um, and I think
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to our third day of the Global Hindu Summit. Today's theme is Vedic Wisdom and Environmental Harmony. We have a wonderful moderator, that is our Professor S.R. Bhatt Ji from Delhi. He is going to moderate today. Professor S.R. Bhatt Ji, floor is for it.
thank you. Thank you, Guru Dileepji. We are having a really wonderful and fruitful conference, week-long one, and today is the third day. In our conference, many political dignitaries, distinguished academicians have participated, and we are very happy to note that some representative of UNO also joined us, and they made some valuable contribution. Particularly, I would like to refer to Madam Jennifer Rajkumar. She is I think, the only Hindu representative in New York State Assembly. And she not only made a wonderful presentation, she also declared that she was successful in making Diwali as a holiday in New York, and Diwali celebration would be there on a grand scale there in New York. So I find that there is a very good upsurge of Hindu Dharma. This is because Hindu Dharma is ecumenical, it is global, and it is meant for the wellness of the entire humanity and for cosmic peace. So in present turbulent times, if there is any way out, paradigm shift, then it will come only from Hindu Dharma, and therefore we have this Hindu Dharma, which is all inclusive. I call it as having an inclusive pluralism. It negates none. It accepts everyone. And in this, we not only have within the fold of Hindu Dharma, Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and other movements of India, but also of other countries of the world. And therefore, it is all accommodating. This is the beauty of Hindu Dharma, that it is all encompassing, it negates none. Today we have a galaxy of speakers also, and the theme is Vedic wisdom, environmental harmony, climate change, and resultant ecological hazards impacting our social and economic organizations. The theme is of contemporary relevance and significance, because we are suffering from the sort of ecological imbalance which has threatened the very existence of the whole humanity. And that is because we have not cared to have a internal purity and also external purity. Internal purity is more important, purity of our intellect, purity of our mind, purity of our emotions. And we have become a prey to all inimical forces. And that's why we find that in the world there is no harmony, there is no peace, there is all everywhere violence, there is bloodshed, and this epidemic, particularly this corona one, has been devastating. For the first time in human history, perhaps we have a global epidemic, and it is still not eradicated. It's still appearing in newer and newer forms. And therefore, it is high time that we pay attention to our internal environment as also the external environment. In external, that is nature, Mother Nature. And this Mother Nature gets manifested in earth, water, air, fire, and space. And everywhere you have pollution. So there is a need to get rid of it. And for this, mere surmising is not enough. What is needed is a concrete plan of action. So with these preliminary words, I respectfully invite Swami Sri Yudhishthir Das, head of the ISKCON Temple, New Delhi. Uh, uh, he is not only a saint, but also a social activist. And say, he's engaged in social welfare, Loka Sangraha, particularly free distribution of food to needy ones. He's constantly busy in social activities. And therefore, he is not confined to his temple, but he whole society is a temple for him. So he worships the social God, human God, and therefore we are fortunate to have him in our midst to talk about what we should do. And I think with the Government of India, a few days before, he undertook MOU. He will explain it for environmental upgradation and purity. So the floor is now open to Sri Yudhishthir Govind Das. Please.
Thank you very much. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakya Chakshurumritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tinamye Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prachayane Vishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatayane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivedanta. Hare Krishna. Firstly, I would like to thank Professor S.R. Bharji and Professor Gopinath Pillai for making me a part of this very important and very relevant deliberations. So thank you very much, sir. I would also like to thank all the participants and the organizers for putting this whole package together. We also have, as I see on my list, one of my very respected mentors, Rasraj Prabhu, or whom we famously know as Professor Ravi Gomutam. He's also on the call here, so I'd like to convey my pranams to him as well. It is a very important meeting that we are having today in the backdrop of the recently concluded COP26. And it is a critical juncture on many fronts, critical in terms of the climatic conditions that we have witnessed in the near past, critical in terms of the moral and spiritual social response towards others and the world in general, and critical in terms of our spiritual outlook. I'll come back to the spiritual part in a short while, but regarding the COP26, a major sticking point has been the divergent views of the developed and the developing economies on how to build their future. India, in this regard, is a odd player of sorts in this area, because if you look at India's geographical size and population, along with its historical carbon emission rates, you'd find that it's surprisingly low compared to the developed economies. If you base it on the 2017 GDP, you would see that India's per capita carbon dioxide emissions were just something close to 1.5 metric tons compared to the 15 metric tons that were coming out from developed economies like US, Canada, or 10 metric tons from South Korea and so on. Now, we may be able to attribute different socioeconomic reasons for such a low carbon emission. But friends, I would like to submit that a lot of it has to do with the spiritual and cultural outlook of the people of India. After all, this is the land of Sanatana Dharma. It is a common practice even today if you see in many households, as soon as we wake up, the first thing we offer is respects and prayers to Bhumi Devi before setting our foot down. And once you're up from the bed, what do you do before you go to take bath? You remember all the sacred rivers, Ganga, Yamuna, Narmada, Sindhu, Kaveri, Godavari, and so on. So it's a culture, it's a lifestyle built around respecting Mother Nature, all the other living entities, and finally the Bhagwan himself. Now, it is true that every religion does touch upon this topic of environment in one way or the other. But what makes Sanatan Dharma particularly unique, or Hinduism unique, and makes it stand out is its broad and very holistic perspective and a very pragmatic approach towards this subject. Like our respected Professor Bhatt was referring to in the beginning, that it's a very inclusive and a very broad-based understanding of the world. Now, we are witnessing irregular climatic patterns in many parts of the world, like we saw recently the floods and the unseasonic rainfall in South India, or more recently, actually, the tornadoes in US, which I have been told is a rare occurrence in the way it had happened. Now, these things could accelerate as we go into the future. And it is important to realize that while there may be a response from Mother Nature owing to our various activities, I would say that these activities are not the issue in themselves. They are just symptoms of a much bigger and much underlying problem. And at the root cause of this problem, as per the Vedic scriptures, is that it doesn't lie outside, it actually lies inside. It is our consciousness which manifests in the forms of desires, in the forms of aspiration, which results in exploitation of resources. In the Ishopanishad, there is a very famous and a beautiful verse, Isha Vasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatam jagat tena tvaktena punjita mam predakasya swidhanam. So this verse basically tells us that everything that is manifest and that which is unmanifest also belongs to the Supreme Lord. Therefore, one should only use those things that which has been set aside as his quota. And he shouldn't be greedy beyond what is assigned as his quota or for his requirement of maintaining the body and the family and the society together. And this greed or lobha is a manifestation of the desire to accumulate and enjoy independent of God. And that is actually the root cause of all the problems that we face today. And if you see the Vedic scriptures, you see the Puranas, the Upanishads, and even in the Gita, Krishna says, Bhaktaram yake tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram, that everything is meant for his service. But we forget it or we choose to ignore it, and we go in a very different direction, and that results to all the chaos that we are experiencing in the world today. Now, greed is not a 21st century phenomenon. It has been there for quite some time. But what makes this interesting is that this has accelerated and it has become a global problem in the way that we are living our lives today. I have a house, I want a bigger one, I want a bungalow. Now bungalow isn't enough, I need 2 bungalows. I need a holiday home, I have a car, I get a bigger car. When that's not satisfactory, I get a private jet. So this whole concept of, I want the latest iPhone, I want the latest iPad, I want the latest iMac, the whole society seems to be centered around the concept of I. And as long as we center ourselves on the concept of I, no matter how much resources the world can offer, how much resources Prakriti can offer us, that will always fall short. So we need to move beyond the concept of I to we. And it is in this regard that Srila Prabhupada, or A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of the ISKCON movement, the Hare Krishna movement, he would very popularly use this expression, simple living, high thinking. Sorry, to refer to the purpose of life, of using all resources in the service of God and his creation. And when we speak of creation, it is important to remember that it's not just human beings which actually comprise the creation. There is a very beautiful verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Purana, where in the 11th volume it is said that a devotee of the Lord, he sees everything, the Panchabhutas, the sun, the luminaries, all the living beings, the directions, the trees, the oceans, the rivers, as an expansion of Krishna. So when one sees all the creation in this outlook, how can one not have respect and reverence? So this is something that has been a very unique contribution of the Sanatan Dharmic tradition to the world. And taking these teachings forward, Srila Prabhupada, he stressed on these concepts back in the 60s and 70s, even at a time when the word sustainability was nowhere on the radar. So Srila Prabhupada not just started talking about, building communities and building lifestyles centered around the dharmic principles. He actually went ahead and established these communities around the world during his lifetime here. So the purpose of these communities was to establish an ideal model for the world to see how we can live such a lifestyle. Now, we do have the Purusharthas, the Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. And to achieve these Purusharthas, we need to perform actions. So the scriptures do give us provisions to use resources, but with a caveat that it comes in a very judicious form. Now, that doesn't mean that it is taking us back by centuries or we are going back to ancient times. No, one can use technology, one can use these resources, but in a very judicious manner. Professor S.R. Bhattji was referring to the MOU that we recently signed, and that is what we were trying to demonstrate to the world, that it is possible to do that. While I'm talking to you today here from Delhi, from our East of Kailash Center, 85% of the energy that is produced for running the campus, the 3-acre campus, is actually generated from the temple itself using solar. And all our resources are recycled, the water is recycled, the organic waste that is produced is recycled. So in that way, what we are trying to do is have a very minimum carbon footprint, very minimum of the impact that we are creating on the environment is harmful. So this is the outlook that Srila Prabhupada shared with us, and he wanted us to share with the world. Now, friends, it is important to realize that no matter how many of our meetings we have, how many of our deliberations we have, COP26, United Nations, and so on, that until we realize that there is a fundamental problem of consciousness that needs to change, all these meetings will result in a failure. And after all, India is a land of Dharma, and that's something very proud to be from the place. But we also need to remember that Dharma is not something that is very, up in the air kind of thing. Dharma is a very lively thing that needs to be lived every day, every moment. But today, if you see India's beef export, red meat export is right there at the top of the world. Before the pandemic, I remember reading the statistics of 26,000 crore was the export per year. And the same goes for fisheries. So when we start living a lifestyle like this, based on hinsa, then naturally the Prakriti also has a way of responding. The Upanishads say that na hinsat sarva bhutani, that we shouldn't be harming anyone or any living being. But when we start doing that, then yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bharata also takes place. Now, Krishna doesn't need to come every time. He can manifest it in different forms of Adi Devik, Adi Bhautik, Adhyatmic forms of hindrances that we are experiencing today in the form of either, say, pandemic, unseasonal weather patterns, and so on and so forth. So all of this can be in one way addressed by putting God at center. And as soon as we start doing that, the Vedic scriptures say that everything else follows. So Prabhupada would give the example of having, you can have multiple zeros, but as long as there is no one in front of it, all of it falls apart. Same way, all these technological achievements that we have do play a very important role, but as long as there is one in the form of Krishna added in front of it. So as Hindu society leaders, it is important that we take this philosophy that we have practically demonstrate it to the world, because there is nothing else that is needed in times like this than a action-oriented leadership. The world is looking for such a thing, a lifestyle which is based on harmony, compassion, and love for all the living entities. And the more we take it, the more we'll see that there is a transformation in the world. Be it Russia, US, or other countries, wherever I had the opportunity to go, I've seen that there is a practical interest in the dharmic traditions. There is a practical interest in how we live our life. And this needs to be exhibited to the world more and more. So the whole MOU that we wanted to sign was to introduce this concept to the world and invite students. Actually, a lot of students from different American universities are already coming to our Govardhan Eco Village campus in Maharashtra to study how we have set up a 100-acre campus, fully functional. We have about 300 devotees staying there, but all of them are basically based locally, and all the resources are generated locally, and all the waste is also recycled. So recently we had students from the New York State University come there and study this concept. So this is becoming more and more of an interesting idea to the world. And if we, through the mediums of these conferences and through the mediums of these events, take it to the world, I'm sure that it will have a very impactful response from the global community. So with that, I think, Professor Ji, I have run out of time. I was told 15 minutes.
Please conclude.
So I'll just conclude in a short while. So once again, I'll just like to draw my reference to the earlier point that Isha Vasyam Idam Sarvam. So when we manifest all our desires in relation to the Supreme Lord, all the things are in harmony. So once again, I would like to thank all the organizers, Professor S.R. Bhattji and Gopinath Pillai for putting this conference together and for having me as a part of this. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Yudhishthir Das Ji, for a very interesting but practice-oriented deliverance. You are not just a saint who is sitting in an ivory tower, but you are on the field, and you are a practical activist. And that's what we find that your Akshardham temple in Delhi, and also your establishment in Maharashtra, they are witness to how you are not only, you are not talking of environmental concerns as others do. You have environmental consciousness. And in that, you find that you respect everything. Everything is divine. And therefore, everything is to be approached with judicious and I think intelligent way, so that nothing is harmed and everything is able to display one's potentiality for cosmic wellness. So we are really thankful to you. And over to say Guru Dileepji, if you want to say something about that. Yeah.
It was wonderful to meet our Swamiji from Delhi. We have great organizers from the ISKCON temple in New York. I always go there. We are part of it, and they come to our events. We go there. This is a way we bring the 17th goal of the Sustainable Development Goals as a partnership. So the purpose of this Global Hindu Summit itself to bring the value of Hinduism around the globe. You brought the environmental issues very serious. You brought wide range of ideas, what you heard from others, your experience. I'm glad you are training a lot of young people. That is a best part I see from the ISKCON temple. So I can thank you and congratulations for all the work.
Yeah. We thank
Thank you very much.
Dasji. And now I invite Professor Girishwar Mishra ji, former Vice Chancellor of Wardha University, He has been my colleague also in Delhi University in the Department of Psychology, and I find that he is very deeply steeped in Indian culture, and he is very much engaged in the promotion of some of the fundamental ideas and ideals of Indian culture. So he is a versatile genius. He is a prolific writer, and we are eager to listen to him for his erudite presentation. So I invite Professor Girishwar Mishra ji now.
Om Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Guru Dileepji, Professor Bhatt, Professor Pillai, I am very happy that we are going to discuss a very significant aspect of our life. I have been listening to the presentations by scholars, friends of Hindu Dharma for the last 2 days. And today's theme deals with an important issue which is bothering everybody in the entire globe. We have already met in Glasgow. COP26 was dedicated to discuss the concerns of climate change and kind of challenges which are there. I often find that the great Sanskrit poet Kalidas, while writing Vigyan Shakuntalam, starts with praying Lord Shiva, and he recollects all the visible forms of Lord Shiva. Ya srishti srashtu radhya vahati vidhutam ya havir yachahotri yedve kalam vidatta shuti vishayaguna ya sthita vyapta vishwam ya maho sarva vija prakritiriti yaya pranina pranavanta pratyakshabhe prapanna sthanu viravati vasta virashta virisha. I think here the poet brings home the point that whatever is present in the world is something which is occupied by the presence of Ishvara, God, whatever expression you want to use. Now, this creates a different kind of understanding to look at the environment. We often partition self and non-self. We partition self and other. And that kind of partitioning leads to a framework where our goal becomes to control the environment, to use the resources available in the environment for the benefit of self. If self is extended, if there is some kind of bridge between self and not self, and if you think that everything is occupied by God, and I don't want to elaborate that point because that has already been taken into account by many scholars in the previous deliberations. But Purusha is present everywhere. Ishavasamidam sarvam yat kinchit jagat yang jagat. That has already been referred to. So the presence of God is everywhere. So the idea to control or to become master of the environment is problematic. I think the most important example in modern world is the work of Mahatma Gandhi. who very clearly identified that we can be trustee, we can't be owners. Now, this idea of relationship between self and other, between self and not self, between self and environment, provides a different perspective to work with. Because if your concern is to view in totality, if you want to see that abhyaya bhav everywhere, if you want to see that sarva bhuteshu, the same thing is present in all beings, then the idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam may be realized. Then you see the connectivity between self and other. The most important challenge in today's world, which is leading to hinsa, which is leading to violence, almost all kinds of violence, brings home this point that how we relate to others, how we distinguish between self and others. Do we see any kind of similarity? If we see similarity, if there is Atma Upamya, if we think that we have the same kind of structure and we relate to others, I think this relationship is very, very important. So if we go beyond the individualism or the notion of self which is located in body only, and we work for that, I think that is the biggest challenge that we have before us. If we have an expanded notion of self, an inclusive notion of self, which has possibility to relate to others, then things will be organized in a different way. To make it more clear, I would like to mention that instead of an anthropocentric view, if we think that it is the relational world, it is the relationship which is critical and how that relationship can be maintained. One way is to see reality in such a way, the Indian perspective, the Sanatan Dharma perspective, the Vedic perspective, which realizes that the same being is present everywhere. So this kind of openness is going to change the whole perspective. And if we create models of self, I must mention here that the entire psychological development in the Western world has focused on an individualistic notion of self. It does not bother more about the relational notion of self, to the extent that in one of the recent writings, one of our friends has given the title of the book, The Curse of Self. How self, this individualistic notion of self has become a curse, and what are the problems which are taking place, particularly in the developed countries, problems of mental health, relationship related problems. So the notion of self needs to be revised. And I think here, the kind of training, the kind of learning, the kind of socialization, the kind of teaching which is taking place plays a very important role. We see that the destruction which is taking place, which has created the understanding that let us not use the word development, let us call it sustainable development. The development which can be sustained. So we see that there are limits to the resources which are available. Now, if we follow the principle of Ishavasyam idam sarvam and tena tyaktena bhunji tha, so bhoga is good, but tyag purvak bhoga. It's not only the bhoga, it's not only the consumerist perspective which is going to solve the problems. I think we remember that the Purusharthas have Artha and Kama, but the two have to function within the purview of Dharma. But in today's world, Artha is Pandartha or Banikartha. It is the market, which is, it is not Purushartha. It is the market which defines what is the meaning of Artha. What is our role? I think we require revisiting the economic philosophy, and we see what are the limitations of that, and the notion of development itself is being revisited, and people are realizing that these resources are depleting, and we cannot enjoy the same kind of facility for a long time. Now the COP26 has already created a perspective that how to reduce consumption in certain ways. So it's a big issue which we have. In order to survive, in order to grow, in order to enjoy life, it is important to see that the entire Prakriti, and we are parts of, the Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, they occupy everything which is present in the world. So we find that these qualities are present in the person and also in the environment, in the food. We see in Bhagavad Gita that, this is a very important classification of gunas. Of course, one has to become gunatita. One has to become sthita pragya. That requires looking at emotional life and how to control our emotions, our various passions. That becomes a very important concern. I want to mention it because most of the problems which are taking place in today's world relate to these concerns which relate to passions, emotions, motives, and we again connect them with individual self. We need to see that our life is a life which is connected, and the Sanatan Dharma view is that yat pinde tad Brahman, that things are interconnected. What is happening at a level of microcosm and what is happening at the level of macrocosm have some inherent relationship. We will have to create this perspective.
Please conclude.
And I think if we focus on recreating need structures, rethinking about the notion of self, and reorganizing our relationship with others and environment. And here, Sanatan Dharma provides a very strong argument and basis, which is very close to the learnings from modern science. With these words, I congratulate Guru Dileepji for providing this opportunity to share some thoughts. It's a long journey, it's a delayed journey, and I see that this kind of movement is going to provide a new perspective and help to strengthen Hindutva, the essence of Hinduism and Sanatan Dharma. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Girishwar Mishra ji, for a very erudite and enlightening presentation. Hindu Dharma or Sanatan Dharma is characterized by spiritual outlook, which means fundamental unity of all existences and equal respect to all existences. And therefore, we don't have a divisive approach of the self and the not self. We say etat atmi idam sarvam. Everything is self only, manifestation of the same divine self. We are progeny of the same divine self, and therefore we stand on equal footing only. No distinction, no discrimination, and no disrespect to anything. So you have rightly pointed out that what we need is eradication of our ego, the individual consciousness. Well, we have to expand it from I to we, the universal consciousness. I think you have made some very valuable points. So thank you very much. Over to Guru Dileepji for his remarks.
That was a beautiful presentation, Professor Ji. I'm glad you joined and blessing us with your words of wisdom. And we'll keep in touch. We have more events coming up. We'll
Sure.
need support from elders because the wisdom from experience, So definitely we'll be in touch. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Now, I respectfully invite Professor Balram Singh. He is president of Institute of Advanced Sciences at Dartmouth, USA. He has been a regular participant in our webinars, and we have been profited always with his learning and expertise. Though he is a scientist, but he is in fact a spiritual scientist. A scientist who has a spiritual orientation. So now floor is to Professor Balram Singh.
Thank you, Professor Bhatt, and thank you, Dr. Gopinathji, to allow and invite me to more than once. That means I must not have messed up before. At least you have some, still I have some trust in me be able to join you. And I get permission to share my slides.
But within 15 minutes, please. Not more than.
Yeah, sure.
Time constant.
So right now the time is, okay, I got the permission?
Yeah, please.
Okay, great. All right. You're able to see my slides?
Yes.
Well, the Professor Bhatt talking about science and my background in science. One of the things that we have in science, I'm also a chemist. Since 1950, we have added 182 million chemical substances to our inventory. It's a huge number. 50 plus million DNA, RNA, proteins, that kind of things. So in one sense, we can take pride. I belong to American Chemical Society, which keeps track of all this and tells us, how much progress we are making. On the other hand, when it comes to environment, we realize how much problem we are creating. So one of the concepts of Vedic tradition is how this world has come to be. And we are getting this paper out later this month in Ayurveda Journal of Health, where it shows how we from Akash Tattva to Vayu and Agni and then Jal and Prithvi. This is how the world has been created according to Hindu cosmology. And also its exploitation also begins in the same opposite direction. So we have exploited environment at the Earth's level first by building houses, buildings, roads, all kind of stuff. Then we require so much water, and then we mess up we need a lot of energy, and that messes up the air. And the final stage where we are, which is now estimated that by end of the century, there will be, if we continue like this, there will be 2 feet rise in the ocean, which will mean, places like Mumbai or Boston will be gone by end of the century. So it's very, very serious. And we need to examine as much science we can have as possible. So Professor Bhatt said at the beginning, it neglects none. Hindu dharma neglects none. So I wrote a 4-line about it. It never neglects none, but names them all by defining each one through examining them all. So it doesn't neglect, but it also defines. It's very important for people to know that, and it's important to know this dharma. There could be Hindu, may not have dharma. So I'm glad that you said Hindu dharma, because Ravana was also a Hindu and he wasn't following dharma. So just by being Hindu, I think it does not exactly define. Now with that, I want to share this information. Columbia University had recently done a study in which it showed that the less religious countries produce more pollution. And that religion has to be more dharmic. If we can make it all the religions dharmic, that will hugely have an impact on what we do. Now, with that, I thought I had some more slides, and unfortunately it's not coming. So I may have to go back and reshare it. Forgive me. I'll do it still in my 15 minutes.
You may continue with your oral presentation.
Yeah, I know. I'm doing that oral presentation. What I'm trying to do is that recently, I think it was earlier this month on Constitution Day, the Prime Minister made a statement, and that statement said that the West is not allowing us to follow the path they have followed themselves. The West is not allowing us to follow the path by what they have followed themselves, which it means is that we are trying to copy the West. India is trying to copy the West, and that's the statement I wanted to show. Here it is. The colonial mindset has gone against it. Not developing nations are not allowing us to do the same thing. And he quotes all kind of, which is very damning statistics. But that's very interesting, that we are not trying to do something new. We are trying to follow exactly the same, and that is part of the problem. That will be a huge problem for the world, because we are just going to follow what West has been following. The latest study published in Nature Communications that shows, basically saying that we need to get the GDP up for us. And the GDP is the greatest indicator of how messy we are going to create. So the whole concept of GDP itself is a problem. And I think when we are talking about dharma, which has so much to offer in terms of original ideas, not just copying and complying, but original ideas to create for the world, which is where I think this is very important to have the knowledge of the spiritual people, because they also have to understand. They really, I do not want to sound cocky here, but they also need to examine some of these scientific ideas because dharma is for me is a science, because it's not just only for preaching, it's something to understand and examining. So that is very important. Now, the two types of science that we have, one is deductive science, one is inductive science. We don't go in too much in detail, obviously, and it's not needed here. The only thing is, I want to just give an example. The nigamas or holy books are the deductive science. And agamas, which is the tradition of India, which is natural. It is the agamas are yoga, seva, local traditions, Ayurveda. This is very important to emphasize. And then the consequences, in case of agama, you follow the fortnight, you follow the moon cycle to know where we are. Whereas in nigama, it tells you the week, because the week has no basis whatsoever. There is nothing that happens in 7 days. But that's what we follow, which is based on nigama. So we need to get into the deep, the scientific basis of some of these ideas that have been in the dharma and in the Hindu dharma, which is very important to integrate, because then you can speak the language that is needed to be spoken. And then you can go back in between agama and nigama, because that is very important for certain people. You need to tell some rules, but not for all the people. That cannot be the supreme. The rules cannot be the supreme. Observations have to be supreme, and people have to be supreme. So the way to do that, people talk about freedom, independence, equality, and all that. And that's very important for people to then become a scientist. And the way you become scientist by becoming, stilling your own mind first. And that is yoga chitta vritti nirodha. That comes by doing tapa. And then tapa leads, then is use the tapa, and during that time, swadhyaya, so study yourself so that you know your dharma. Then only when you know dharma, then only you can talk about Hindu dharma, because you don't even know your dharma, forget about Hindu dharma. It's a very broad. Then you know detached way of your known nature, and then you first of all, then you become healthy. And what is the health is really swast. And then you do whatever you want to do in this world, that will eventually lead to equality and equal rights, and you will get appropriate results of whatever you need to do. And then we carry out our duty without worrying about the fruits of action. That's karmande badhikaraste ma phale sukadachan. This is my way of looking at scientifically our dharmic tradition. And this is also, I've told this many times, this is part of Indian Constitution. So Indian Constitution talks about scientific temper in Article 51A. And we can, when we follow that, then we have the kartabya bhav, which is the supreme. And when you do your kartabya without worrying about anything else, you reach to the level of Ishvara. It's you who can reach the level of Ishvara, and which means then you're fair to everything, and you take whatever is needed, you give everybody what is needed. And that is the kind of fundamental of Hindu dharma that has been followed. Now this, once you have something like this, you get into the mode of Vesti, where you are, your mind is, because you have already stilled your mind. You then interact with society, then you interact with the environment, because it's a society as a whole interact with the environment. And then you reach to the samasti. And this concept of system and surrounding, which is used very commonly in physics, is the same as yat pinde tat brahmande. You have to have the idea when system and surrounding are in resonance, then you reach the yat pinde tat brahmande. And then you can, only then you can talk about the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the current idea in the whole world and being followed by our country, India, which is by including our current Prime Minister, like I already said, nationalism cannot go together with Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, because we have the Ayurvedic science that connects everything to everything else. And I do not have time to elaborate, but I can tell you that even somebody who is sitting next to you has an effect on you, even though the person doesn't say a thing. So this is very important connection that we need to make scientifically, integrated with the people who have dharmic knowledge. They know a lot more than I do. I have been learning only from the mostly philosophy and spiritual people, and then trying to integrate in what I understand. Once we have that, what I propose is that then there is a different type of world order. The world order is right now being defined by somebody else. Samuel Huntington defined world order by writing this book, Clash of Civilization, based on basically religion and some ideology. There is a world order based, which is defined by Noam Chomsky, who talks about basically political stuff that is going on. The latest book on world order is written by Henry Kissinger, who actually uses Westphalian peace in 17th century as a basis to talk about China, the religion, the political situations, and economic and other kind of conditions. But everybody is defining a world order. And I'm sorry to say, by giving example that I gave you about the Indian Prime Minister, whom I adore the most, because he's the hardest working Prime Minister, talking about nationalism, which kind of defying the whole idea of dharma. Unless we make internationalism, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam cannot come. So we have what I suggest, that we have a different kind of, we are not political people. We have no interest, or at least I don't. have any interest or any ability to do any changes in the politics or religion or any of that kind. But I think we can talk about Ayurveda and Yoga world order, because that is for everybody. And when we have that, then we can study the science, explain to people how to connect with the nature, how to live a lifestyle, how to have a food, and restrict rather than talking about. I'm a little bit of concern about saying that we make progress, let's have the technology and we use the technology. I'm sorry that it does not have really. Technology is something that it takes you away from nature. And Mahatma Gandhi, there was a quotation about Mahatma Gandhi always said, the technology only if you absolutely need it, not because you want it. The desire cannot be part of it. And there is actually movement. There was a comment earlier that there is a movement in the world. People are accepting Indian traditions, and that is the solution that is available in the world. And I think there is a huge number of people. This is a meeting of National Ayurvedic Medical Association that I go to once in a while. And that shows that we are able to influence and impact people. And with that, I think students love it. This is a student high school class in my vicinity where the students are learning by making quilts based on Ayurveda. So with that comment, I would like to conclude that we really need to try to work for a world order that will be in offing and for the solution of the environmental problem using dharma and dharmic tradition. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Balram Singh, for your words of wisdom emanating from your vast learning and experience. You have presented the theme in a very scientific, logical, and methodical manner. That's the beauty of it. And you have rightly pointed out that there is a need for a paradigm shift, and that shift can come only from the Sanatan Dharma, and as it is expressed in Ayurveda and also Yoga and other knowledge traditions. So we are really grateful to you, as you have been always with us with your innovative ideas, which are useful, also practical in nature. Thank you very much. Over to Guru Dileepji.
Yeah, it was a beautiful presentation. I enjoyed, and I totally agree with you about nationalism, that going too much and create a lot of tension between people, that's not healthy. So we should focus more universalism. That will bring the value of Hinduism. Hinduism itself, talking about Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, means that's a universalism. Definitely, people like us can educate people little bit. Doesn't matter 7 days or not. We are having like 3 hours per day for 7 days. That is only 21 hours. But over 1,500 people are watching every day. That means we are giving something to people, otherwise they won't come. I know all of your hard work will make a change in very soon. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, Professor.
Now, if Professor Bala Ganpati is around, I would like to invite him. Bala Ganpati. Otherwise,
I'm here, sir. I'm here.
You are here.
I'm very much here, sir.
Okay, please make your presentation. Professor Bala Ganpati is a very erudite scholar, an original thinker, a philosopher. He was professor and still he is a professor, of course. He was heading the Department of Philosophy, Delhi University, and he is an original thinker. That's the beauty of his presentation. So I invite him to make his scholarly presentation. Please, Bala Ganpati, please.
Sabhaya Namaha. Thank you so much, sir, for those kind words. Guru Dileepji, Professor S.R. Bhatt, and Professor Gopinath Pillai, because of whom I'm here today. They have extended kind invitation to me. And the co-panelists today, Professor Balram Singh, Professor Girishwar Mishra-ji, and Professor David Lawrence, and Sri Bhunesh Khosla-ji, and Swami Yudhishthir Das-ji, and other distinguished speakers and invitees who have joined us.
Professor Janak Dave also will join us later on, of course.
Yeah, Professor Daveji and other distinguished friends and scholars, invitees who have joined us today. And namaste to all of you. Let me begin with the basic concern of the human life. The basic concern of the human life in any tradition, for that matter, when you look at, is peace. No, it is basically worrying about the existence itself, the existence of the being. So is it that it stops with the existence of the being? No, because you cannot live alone. Your existence, if it is alone, it's not going to work out. That's how you look for coexistence, which means you need somebody else as well. And is it that just mere coexistence is enough, where there are fights and ruptures and conflicts? No. The end of human life is peaceful coexistence. Okay, you want to exist, you want to coexist, and you want to peacefully coexist. And this is the end. This is the goal of human life in any tradition. And this is captured very well within Indian tradition, in the sense that this is what I would try to explain by taking recourse to some of the contemporary themes that were picked up in terms of symbiosis and co-creativity. This is what I would try to do in this brief 15 minutes time that is given to me. So if it is peaceful coexistence that is very important for the human life, and if that is the goal of human life, then we have to understand these two aspects. What is peace? What is peacefulness? And coexistence with whom? The other. Is it peaceful coexistence of the self or somebody else? So the relational aspect that Professor Girishwar Mishra was also pointing out. So these two aspects are important to me. And let me start with this concept of peace. How do we understand that? When we look at the classical Indian tradition, we find that importance that is given to peace is enormous. You pick up any of these Upanishads, they would start with Shanti mantras. So why is it that they start with Shanti mantra? Some people, some perverted people with perverted thinking have said that it is because there is a rupture all the time. This thought of they began with the Shanti mantras, but otherwise there would be a profound reason because of which they have understood the importance of the peace, and what is the conceptualization of peace is very important there. When they were conceptualizing peace, they were not conceptualizing peace in terms of the opposite of the war. No, that is a binary conception through which we arrive at the wrong understanding of concept of peace or shanti. So what is being hinted at, conceptualized in the classical Indian tradition when they spoke about shanti is something that makes the being real. The individual has to live his life and understand himself to be the real. And by understanding oneself to be the real, one obviously becomes conscious of his reality. And once this conscious being, consciousness and reality come together, the product of that is bliss, happiness. So that is how the peace, concept of peace is explained in terms of Sat Chit Ananda, being real, and thus being conscious, and thus the outcome is bliss. So this is the kind of conception of peace that is provided in the classical Indian tradition. So if that is the peace, then how do you look at this peaceful coexistence? Then the point that we have to understand is peaceful coexistence with whom? Is it with the self alone? Because some people, because of the importance that is given to sannyasa ashrama, some people have wrongly understood the whole tradition of classical Indian, whole classical Indian tradition to be like giving importance to only individual. No, that's not the case, because the totality is always given importance, and that's what I'm trying to stress here when we talk about the other. How do we understand this other? No? Because it doesn't stop with the self, it has to extend to the other. And how does this extension happen? Unfortunately, in our schools, in India especially, we develop the epistemology of our kids only in terms of binary epistemology. So we tell them that there are opposites in the world. The whole universe is divided into all the possible known things are divided into two categories, known and two categories which are opposites. And if you want to understand, this binary epistemology tells us that if you want to understand one, you have to understand the other, or you have to identify the opposite, and you have to understand this concept as the absence of the other. Okay, so this is the kind of binary epistemology that is being implanted into each one of us. In fact, all of us are products of the same education system, especially I'm talking about the people in India. And this is a very dangerous kind of thing. What it tells is, when you look at water, what it tells you that you have to identify the opposite of the water. And then they say opposite, if you pick up fire, then they would say you have to identify the opposite of fire in terms of water, and then understand water, fire as the opposite or as the absence of the water. Okay, similar thing is being extended to even male and female. Okay, so one is understood to be the absence of the other, which is a dangerous kind of epistemology, because when it comes to Indian tradition, whether it is fire or air or water, all of them are basic constituents, and they are complementary to each other. And they are complementary in the sense that unless they come together, nothing new comes into existence. In order to make something new to come into existence, they have to come together. The natural elements have to come together. Similarly, the so-called opposites like male and female, they have to come together so that something new comes into existence. They are complementary in that very fundamental sense, which is wrongly interpreted to be the binaries. And that is the danger that we are facing. You know, the consequences of this binary epistemology are very dangerous, and they are visible in the communities and among the people now. Because once you tell a tender mind, it's a small kid, that male and female are opposites, and then you tell them how to deal with your opponent, what will happen? Right? The society would be full of rupture and violence. And that's what we are witnessing now. So this binary epistemology has to be transcended. And how do we do that? In order to arrive at a harmonious kind of one, which is taught in classical Indian tradition very well. So this binary epistemology is basically anthropocentric. It says that the world can be understood only through the individual human being's perspective, man's perspective, human being's perspective. And it is also understands that, or it also advocates that the world is, the human beings are autopoietic. Autopoietic in the sense that they are self-generating and they are autonomous beings, because the whole of ethics, you look at the kind of ethical theories that are developed, what they try to show is that only human beings are autonomous beings. Remaining all the beings are dependent beings, and only human beings are autonomous beings. And that is how ethics is applicable only to human beings, right? And only human beings are self-generating and self-correcting, with self-defined boundaries, with predictable kind of behavior. This is what autopoiesis means. And this is how homocentric understanding of the human being and also the world has completely usurped the minds of people with binary epistemologies. We need to definitely go beyond that. And for that, we have very useful tools in our own Indian tradition, which are very important to every other tradition as well, not just to the Indian tradition. So one of the important points is the concept of samatha that we come across in Bhagavad Gita, where even concept of yoga is also defined in terms of samatha, no? Samatvam yogam uchyate, which is where equanimity is stressed. It is not treating everything equally. No? So some people wrongly understand and interpret it to be looking at everything in an equal manner. No, it is basically giving its due place to everything. No? If there is a needle, it has its own due place, and you give its due place to that. And if you have a sword, it has its own due place and give its due recognition to that. With regard to whether you are talking about objects or whether you are talking about other beings who are with you, or you are talking about your own emotions, it says you only try to give its due place. Don't take it beyond what it deserves to be. No, this is how you can, it would be possible to go beyond this binary epistemology and go beyond this conception of homocentric and also autopoietic attitude. The other important concept that we have is alignment. Self-alignment is very important because constantly in Indian tradition, what is stressed is vichara, self-inquiry. And once you begin with self-inquiry, you would be having self-understanding, and that's what makes you to align yourself with your own self and also with the other. And when we say the other, it is not just the human beings, it is also the cosmology and the spirituality that exists around you. So this alignment is very important in Indian tradition, which is wonderfully stressed. And harmony and interdependence are also stressed within the holistic conception of human life. Along with these two, other important point that I believe to be understood here is Indian tradition strongly stresses co-creative capacity of the individual. Okay, so when we are acting, it is not that we are sole autonomous beings who are acting on the world and using it. What is important is to understand that in the process of acting, we are co-creating. And when do we say co-creating? The other is also cooperating with you and helping you to create something. So once we understand the importance of the co-creativity that is stressed in Indian tradition, we'll be able to understand the importance of the nature around us. Okay, so since we are not completely autopoietic beings, we have to depend on the other. Other is a whole thing that exists, not just the human beings. And this leads me to the final concept, symbiosis. Symbiosis is something very interesting and which is to be understood as the opposite of autopoiesis that I was trying to stress, where autopoiesis is self-creating and self-maintaining and self-regulating, and also it has its own, it creates its own material. Such kind of a being is called autopoiesis, autopoietic being. And so far, for a long time, we have understood that because of this homocentric, anthropocentric attitude, we thought that human beings are completely autopoietic beings. Now, there is a reversal of this conception where we are stressing the importance of autopoiesis, where making with, we are always, whatever we are making, that is also made with, along with the other things. It is not that we are self-generating, and whatever we are generating is also because of so many other things that are there around us. So that is how what is being stressed is collectively producing systems. Okay, what symbiosis stresses is collectively producing systems with information and control, where information and control are distributed to all the systems, whether you are talking about environment, biological system, or physiological system, or a psychological system, whatever system that you are talking about, or a spiritual or cosmic system, whatever system that you are talking about, all of them are impacting the other, and some change in one is caused not just because of the potentiality of that particular system, it is because of the existence of all the other systems around it which make that happen. That is how the concept of Rita is that. Concept of Rita, the cosmic order. So people may ask, how does the cosmic order impact what I should do now, right? In that case, see, the study of horoscope, looking at the stars, they try to explain what would happen. So some people may say it's not scientific, but it need not be the scientific in the sense the modern science talks about, but it was a Shastra, science, very well understood in Indian system. So what I'm saying is this symbiosis, which is also, as Professor Girishwar Mishra has stressed, relational aspect is very important here. And this is what takes us beyond the individual and makes us realize the importance of the other, okay, other than human beings exists in the world. And that is what takes us to the core of environmental concern that we have been talking about. And this whole thing, whatever I said, gets summed up in one sloka, Shanti mantra that we find in Ishavasya Upanishad. Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bala Ganapati, for a very brilliant, analytical exposition of some of the key concepts of Sanatan Dharma. Rightly, you have pointed out that existence has to be ensured by peaceful coexistence. So it should be peaceful, so that everyone gets an opportunity to develop one's own self, to enhance one's own self, and it has to be a corporate enterprise, not an individual-centered. So we always talk of dependence on others. But the other that we have is not the external other, it is the internal other. We internalize the so-called external. So when we say I is to be enlarged as we, then all others are accommodated in I. Etat atmidam sarvam. This is a very, I think, significant concept of Hindu Dharma, Sanatan Dharma. You have also offered a critique of this binary epistemology. In fact, this binary epistemology we have inherited from Aristotle itself, when he made a distinction between matter and mind, etc. And Descartes sharpened it. But this has brought about terrible devastation, not only in our psyche, but also in our practical life. And therefore, you had also talked about this approach, symbiotic approach of Indian culture. I mean, there are many ideas you have thrown which need to be pondered over, and they are extremely useful. So we are grateful to you for your innovative presentation. Now over to Guru Dileepji.
I just stick with one point, that is the coexistence. I always tell my students and my colleagues, celebrate our existence. Our life itself is a beautiful thing to celebrate, each moment to celebrate, instead of fighting each other, wasting our time. Make our life as a fruitful for others. When we live for others, that will bring the beauty of the life. I appreciate you brought a wonderful point. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, in our list, we have Professor David Lawrence. Is he around? Professor David Lawrence from, pardon?
I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm naming Lawrence.
Yeah. So he is a professor of philosophy in North Dakota University, and he has a deep spiritual orientation, and we have been meeting him in our several other webinars. So I welcome him and cordially invite him to make his presentation within the given time of 15 minutes, please.
Okay, well, thank you to all. I'm honored to be here. I should say a couple of things. One is I am interested in environmental issues, but I've been very busy finishing the semester. So I'm primarily work on intercultural philosophy. focusing on non-dual Kashmiri Shaivism, Patrihari, and some areas of Buddhism and Tantra. And I can only make some general remarks here because that's all I've had time to prepare. Some general remarks about the theme of Hindu approaches to the environment, to the protection and assistance to the environment. I'll leave it to others who are more knowledgeable to situate Navjoti Sri Karnakara Guru in relation to what is discussed. To proceed, J. Baird Callcott, in his book, Earth's Insights, a multicultural survey of ecological ethics, made some positive characterizations of Hinduism and Buddhism regarding activism for the environment. I'll explain his positive observations below. However, Callcott overall expressed strong reservations about these traditions, particularly Hinduism. His main objection to Hinduism is that, first of all, taking Advaita Vedanta as the essence of Hinduism, he argues that Hinduism is too otherworldly to properly value environmental ethics. He argues the same way about more skeptical varieties of Buddhism, which view attachment as the main cause of dukkha. With regard to Hindu philosophy, proponents of the diverse Hindu traditions, schools, philosophical schools, besides Advaita Vedanta, disagree strongly that one school should be taken as the representative of all the others. I do not, okay, I'm not going to enumerate all these schools. I'm sure all of you know about them. In any event, Hindu academic philosophy, in my opinion, is still very far from the so-called essence of Hinduism, which includes a lot of sectarian and popular traditions. In addition, though classical Advaita Vedanta places a lot, Shankara places a lot of emphasis on sannyasa, it does have a certain way of talking about the immanence of Brahman in the world. The world is really Brahman. The snake is actually the rope. Also, in a lot of popular interpretations of Advaita Vedanta, particularly in Vivekananda's and subsequent or related approaches, including even that of Aurobindo, there are many ways of affirming the relevance of non-dualism to various sorts of worldly reformation, including environmental. Regarding my own, backtracking to my own specialization, the specific non-dual theistic, or some say panentheistic unity in non-dual Shaivism and related Tantra, and when you get to all the details, it's very distinctive. The vision of Shiva emanating a real world through Shakti has certainly been interpreted, as the basis of showing the sacredness and divinity of the environment. Thus, Rita Sharma has thus engaged this tradition with feminism and ecology she calls ecofeminism, and many call that. Nevertheless, I would say that the overall worldview of non-dual shamanism. I don't mean the specific aspects of doctrine and Shiva Shakti and all the various epistemological and ontological theories. But in my view, the overall worldview of non-dual shamanism, the basic view of some sacred reality present in everything, is the most, in my reading, is the most common one of the Upanishads. In my interpretation, which I'm sure if someone's a member of another tradition, they may see it differently, but in my interpretation, Brahman in the Upanishads is usually an agent. It does things. I know Shankara doesn't like that, but I think that they describe it. You see that in the Kena Upanishad very clearly. The Upanishads also usually say that the world is Atman or Brahman. They don't say, oh, it's a big illusion of some kind or a magical fabrication. They usually say that it is Atman or Brahman rather than any kind of illusion. In addition, as is implied by a long-standing research project of Sundar Vishwalingam called Abhinavagupta and the Synthesis of Indian Culture, I agree with his basic contention that he's explained to me that the general view of not the specifics, but the overall vision of non-dual shamanism is itself not distinctive, but in a way typifies much of popular and non-philosophical Hinduism. A lot of Hinduism sees the world in a quite similar way. There is an ultimate, sometimes called Brahman, usually, often also viewed as a god, and this ultimate is somehow present, immanent in the world. This common understanding may variously be described in philosophical terms in a purely Advaita way or in terms such as Veda Vedavada or Vishishta Advaita and so on. I'm not, denying the perspectives of Nyaya and other dualistic systems. I'm saying this is a frequent view, that's all. This frequent popular Hindu worship of an often theistic, and we can say more or less non-dual reality immanent in the world is the basis, combined with virakti, of a lot of besides this passion and so on, there's a lot of this vision of the divine is the basis of a lot of the physicality, aesthetic beauty, and socially progressive action throughout centuries of Hindu history. The world is somehow sacred. In the present, many people have endeavored to show the relevance of various traditions. Some Christians will say this is what Christianity is about. Muslims will say this is what Islam is about. Buddhists will say this is what Buddhism is about. And that is a dimension of all those traditions. And many scholars of Hinduism have argued that this is what Hinduism is about. And they've tried to show the relevance of Hinduism and the other traditions to worldly enjoyment, because that's part of the modern ideology, which is influencing everybody, and also different forms of modern social progress. The representation of a broad tradition of world-affirming Hinduism is basically in support of the suggestion about Hindu popular traditions. He focused on Kashmiri Pandits, but he's making some general observations. That is of the book non-renunciation written in 1987 by Triloki Nath Manan. That's what his main point is, that not only is renunciation very important in Hinduism, we know it is, but non-renunciation is also very important. There are many ways of embracing the world. Hindu, somewhat popular traditions, this broad stream of a lot, not all, of Hinduism is also, in a sense, what is valorized and interpreted very profoundly in the Bhagavad Gita. Some scholars, in a sense, misrepresent the historical role of the Gita in saying it's the Hindu Bible or something like that. I mean, there are many other alternatives, but of course it is, and as you all know, extremely influential, and it's a quite profound book in explaining the path to moksha in mundane life. And this scripture was extremely influential on many programs of different sorts of social activism, including those of Gandhi, and it's also relevant to many varieties of environmentalism. So, to return to the main theme, popular Hindu theism, or what I'm calling more or less non-dualism, provides the basis for people perceiving a religious reality in the environment, and thus a religious purpose in ecological activism. This parallels the sense of the sacred in nature that Caldecott, who I started with, and other scholars have worked to retrieve from the various indigenous and colonized traditions of the world, and been colonized by large corporations and servile and corrupt governments. I mean, it's the corporations that come first, and then the governments are basically supporting them. That even goes back to classical colonialism. There's the East India Company, the East Africa Company, and Hudson Bay Company, and so on. So, with regard to Caldecott, again, it should also be observed that Buddhism likewise presents a variety of approaches to philosophy and religious practice, which often in various ways affirm rather than deny the world. You can find that in Buddhism too. Despite Caldecott's stereotypes about otherworldly so-called Eastern religions, he cannot help but acknowledge, like contemporary and Weitermenanten scholar and philosopher Elliot Deutsch, the operation of a non-dualism-based empathy in that tradition. Non-dualism is very frequently, like in the presentation we just heard, the basis of cooperation, understanding and caring about others. This is sometimes accompanied in these traditions by a sense of interconnectedness or an accompanying organicism, like the symbiosis our previous speaker just talked about. And it's also the Gaia hypothesis, that the world is all one form of life. And deep empathy found expression in Vivekananda and Gandhi, even though whether they fit, or Vivekananda does, whether Gandhi fits in this broad pattern or not, I'll leave for others to decide.
You may now conclude, please, sir. Please conclude.
Okay, yes, I'm certainly. This is seen in a great deal of environmental activism, including the Chipko movement. Albert Schweitzer was deeply inspired by the South Asian life ethic. Okay, I just have one short paragraph. So on the basis of the immanence of the divine in nature and empathy, the various Dharma-oriented traditions of South Asia agree deeply with Native American, African, Polynesian, East Asian, and other indigenous traditions in finding religious meanings in working to protect and strengthen our environment. The Abrahamic traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam also will join all the others when they see humans not as despots, but as the stewards or caretakers of nature. So all these religions can work together. They can see the religious value in trying to support the life of our environment. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Professor David Lawrence, for your very positive and constructive presentation of the Hindu way of life, particularly emphasizing the non-dualism and resulting from cooperation, because we have to have coexistence and then interdependence and interrelationship. So this is the real nature of reality. Reality is a network of interdependent entities, and therefore you have rightly pointed out that in respect of environment also, we have to be conscious of this relationship of interdependence. Thank you very much. Over to Guru Dileepji, if he's around. Dileepji? Guru Dileepji is...
I'm in a phone call, Professor.
Yeah. So now, may I invite Sri Bhuvanesh Khoslaji, if he's around?
Namaste.
Khoslaji?
Namaste.
You are there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste to one and all. It is indeed an honor to be among such noble souls who have gathered here virtually from all over the world for the Global Hindu Summit. May I take a moment to express my gratitude to His Holiness Guru Dileepji Maharaj for organizing this virtual 7-day conference, and of course, Professor S.R. Bhattji and Professor Gopinath Pillai for giving me the honor in this session. Vedic wisdom and environmental harmony, climate change, and the resulting ecological hazards and the social and economic impacts is the topic of this session. May I start with a verse of Atharvaved, Mata Bhumi, Putro Ahem, Prithivya. Care for our Mother Earth as a grown-up cares for his mother. This, ladies and gentlemen, the very message from Vedas is what we ought to have as the center of the discussion, in not only describing the problem of the environmental challenge, but also seeking the solution within the divine Vedas to our environmental challenges. I shall introduce some very basic but very universal messages of the Vedas that relate to the environment. These are not new concepts, but maybe in the way I present them in a simplistic approach, hopefully drive home the point that the solutions and the problem, so the description of the problem and the process and the solution to the problem all exist in our divine Vedas. The number one concept being dharma. Vedas give us the message that protection of our environment is dharma. Dharma, as you all know, is simply what is our duty. In interest of time, I shall not go over the 10 detailed components of dharma, but may I highlight the very last principle of dharma, satya. Satya being truth, which is being a very important and a relevant concept of dharma when it comes to the environment. It talks about the 3 duties and 3 types of truths. First being the thought. What is going on in our mind? What is our intent? Number two, our speech, verbal, our expression, what we say. And lastly, the deed, our actions, execution of what's in our mind and what's on our speech. That leads us to the second concept on the basis of Hinduism, the message of Vedas is karma. Vedas teach us to perform good deeds. Taking actions that are righteous and just is what is exactly that is prescribed. We must accept that every action has an equal or a matching reaction. Performing karma in accordance with dharma, as we just talked about. Starting with our thoughts, speech, deed, intent, expression, execution. Now you might ask, what does karma and dharma, or dharma and karma in that order, have to do with the environment? Well, the Vedas teach us that it is our duty, it is our dharma to protect and nurture the environment. And how we do that, the solution to that is the types of deeds. What are karma? If we are pure in our thoughts, if we are pure in our speech, then I submit we are pure in our actions. And those actions would be righteous, would be just towards our Mother Earth, our environment. Another problem is excessive and unethical consumption that has led to this environmental crisis. Human beings, being the most intelligent species of the creation, are trapped in this mad rush of consumerism. We ourselves are responsible for the scarcity of the resources that Mother Earth has offered us. But we're also responsible for the unethical consumption. However controversial the topic may be, the data supports a plant-based diet is what is in balance with the ecosystem. Not only leads to better health, it alleviates poverty in the world by making food and fresh water available more evidently, and it improves the quality of life of the air we breathe in. The other consumption or the unnatural resources is, let's talk, to give an example, is to production of ethanol from corn, where there is abundance of corn in one part of the continent, of the universe, there's a shortage, there is poverty, there is still hunger. Yet in the West, we find a new, rather than distributing that corn or finding cheaper ways to produce it, we take it to produce ethanol, which is used for things like gasoline. Pollution. So when we specifically talk about environmental pollution, we must take the Vedic approach. Pollution of our natural resources begins with the pollution of our thoughts and our actions. And that's where the karma theory comes into play. Inversely, polluted air and land, which we end up with because of our polluted thoughts, also actually pollutes our thoughts and our emotions. So this moral decline, the slippery slope that we are on, our antisocial behavior, rising individualism, goes in hand with the deterioration of the biosphere. Now let us move towards the solution, which also is in that statement that I made earlier. Respectfully, science is not enough to solve the crisis. We respect science, we look for scientific solutions, but as Professor Bhatt in the very, very beginning, in the introductory of this session, stated that the answer is really eternal. We have a very popular campaign of reduce, reuse, recycle around the world. That, ladies and gentlemen, in my belief, is not enough. The Vedas teach us that we must replenish. We must be we must be responsible human behavior. So beyond reducing, reusing, and recycling, we must replenish and restore responsible human behavior. And that is the only way to respect our planet, Mother Earth. All humans must reconnect with Mother Earth in reverence in life. The world's population needs to revive the life of our ancestors, which was deeply rooted in the nature, a life that was anchored in living values and not just caring for ourselves, family, society, but our environment. Ethics. When we talk about ethics, the use of resources, the natural resources, the motherland has given us so much place to live, sustains our life by providing us with the necessities, as well as means of increasing our happiness to even attain eternal bliss and salvation. But again, if our thoughts are polluted, our speech is polluted, our actions will be polluted. We must understand the cycle of seasons, crops, and judicially use these resources. We must revitalize and take on the practice of Agnihotra, not only for cleansing the air, but cleansing our thoughts. Maharishi Swami Dayananda, the founder of Arya Samaj, reintroduced the Vedic way of life, the five daily duties. And the very prime of that is a Devi Agnihotra. It helps us improve the quality of air, water, land, and the fields. And it more importantly cleanses our thoughts, our speech, and our actions. Living and let live, live and let live other species to ensure sustainable ecological balance. The debate continues, vegetarianism, plant-based diet. But again, as stated before, it's shown the world is seeing the health benefits. We must go back to our natural remedies as per Ayurveda, the ancient Vedic medicinal system, to look for solutions. Again, using too much chemicals, as Professor Ram had said before, we keep on exploring all these chemicals. A lot of those are used medicinally, but then we're also creating issues and unknown side effects, right? So moving on, standing firm, walking among the path of dharma, the righteous living, just as a Mother Earth will do in its routine. We should know our planet Earth, we should respect it, and the respect the universe in its universality itself. Some actions that can be taken beyond what I've already stated is teaching our children to be respectful towards the planet Earth. We must teach our future generations. We know we cannot change the past, but living in harmony, being conscious, and having that purity of thought driven at a very, very elementary level will lead our future generations, will encourage them to be more righteous in their actions, especially when it comes to our environment. And we must recognize the essence of strong leadership, of individuals who have organized such conferences, who have these thoughts and creating these think tanks to finding environmental solutions, whether it be a spiritual or a scientific or the combination aspect. We must continue to hold such conferences which lead us to solutions. Mother Earth, in conclusion, will be only peaceful for us when we would be ethical towards her. We strive for the Shanti of Prithvi. Thank you again for inviting me for this important conference and to the noble souls for listening to me. Om
Thank
Shanti,
you,
Shanti.
Khosla ji. Mata Bhumi Putro Ham Prithivya. This sums up in fact, the Indian understanding, Indian approach to environment. And Indian Sanatan Dharma, you have rightly pointed out, is dharma-centric. And dharma gets manifested in discharge of our duties, our responsibilities to each and every iota of the cosmos, because everything is the progeny of that Mother Earth. So this idea is really grand, noble, and worthy of being pursued. You have also pointed out how the concept of Satya emanates from Dharma. And Satya in terms of thought, speech, and action. So it's a very brilliant idea that you have thrown. We are really thankful to you for your nice presentation. And you have also emphasized that, well, we have to look to the future. We have to be future oriented, and our young children should be taught as to how to be friendly with environment. Because much depends upon their psyche, their mode of thinking, and their way of living. And therefore, education has to be therefore engineered in that direction. So thank you very much. Over to
Thank you, Dr.
Guru
Bhatt.
Dileepji.
Thank
Over to Guru Dileepji.
I want to focus on one point about the greediness. Only human being, the most greediest animal in the world, for destroying. Even we are not hungry, we want to take other people's food. This is the way we behave. So we had to be minimalized, and we had to keep our mind more open. I know Ganesh is living in America. He knows what is India, what is America. I'm glad you joined. Appreciate you.
Thank you,
Now,
Guruji.
this
Thank you, Dr.
consumerism has been a bane from America only.
No, look at the world. East is look towards the west. West is look towards the east.
Yeah.
Same time. You know, we need a balanced way of life, actually.
Yeah. Now we have Professor Janak Daveji, who is a director of Akshardham Research Foundation, and he is also a good Sanskritist. He was a professor of Sanskrit, and he has a mastery over Bhagavad Gita. So I invite him to make his brief presentation.
I hope you are hearing me. Is it okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
can you hear me? Can you hear me, sir?
Okay. Okay.
First of all, I would like to thank the great teachers that we have with us, Professor Siddheshwar Bhatt Sahab. We have Guruji, Dileepji. We have, professors here who have studied for lifetime. And I also thank my great friends, Gopinath ji, who has invited me. I want to continue with what Professor David Lawrence said and Balaganpati said about Bhagavad Gita. And in the basis of, entire Indian Hindu way of life or Hinduism or Indian philosophy, there is what is known as inclusivism. And what is inclusivism, is defined by a great lover of Indian philosophy, Paul Hacker, a German professor, who explained this as taking over the new without radically giving up all the past. You do the balance between what is acceptable, what will help you, and what will take you further. And this is also, Professor, but initially described pluralism, accepting the views of others, and syncretism, where good ideas combine together. And friends, I do not have any other better book to explain these extraordinary qualities of Hindu way of life than the Bhagavad Gita. And I would like to be as short as possible. Within 5 or 7 minutes, I will try to finish. Let us see, what is the background of the Bhagavad Gita. It is a part of, Mahabharata, a Bhishma Parva, and it has 700 slokas and 18 adhyayas. But how is the beginning? The beginning is that of a war. And the war between the cousins. And the great teacher tries not to have the war. Somehow he is unable. Even when, he goes on behalf of the Pandavas and says, actually they are the owners of Hastinapur and they must get the kingdom. Duryodhana, says, I will not give you an inch of land without the war. And then the war becomes inevitable. And in the beginning we say, a great teacher is in demand. Everybody wants to have his help. Both Arjun as well as Duryodhana go for the help. Arjun sits near the feet as a student, Duryodhana near the head. And when Lord opens the eyes, oh, you have come for what? He says, there's a war and I want your help. And the Duryodhana says that, but I have come first. And Lord Krishna, being a very good judge, he said, okay, you asked for something, but I'm not going to take part in the war. I will not take the weapon. And then Duryodhana, was a person who wanted physical help. And he said, I want, your army. If you don't want to, take the war weapons, it's okay. And then Lord Krishna says to Arjun, you have no choice. He says, okay, you are, my friend, philosopher and guide. I don't want anything. Now, friend, we come very quickly to the beginning and see how the student, behaves with the teacher, whom he knows very well. He gives an order. Senayoho ubayoho madhyeratam sapayame achita yavadetan niriksheham yuddukaman avasthitam kehi mayasa yuddhavyam asmindana samudyame. And like a good, chauffeur or a driver, Lord said, yes. He takes, the chariot in front of the Kauravas and looking at him, the entire mind of the great warrior changes. And he says, Ahobat mat papam kartum devasitaha vayam yat rajya suklobena hantum swajana mudyataha. I don't want to fight. What will you do? Lord says, I will beg. Begging is better than this. See, what I want to say is the type of, pluralism, the type of inclusivism that we find in Bhagavad Gita, Lord does not argue much. But in the second adhyaya, the 7th sloka, Arjun realizes, Shishyaste ham shadimam tuam prapanna and karpanya dosha upahata swabhava. He says, I am your student. Please tell me what is good for me. And here, friends, the inclusivism or syncretism starts off Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna does not say, go and fight. He says, look, I want to explain to you the entire situation. And then he explains to him why he has to fight by karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga. He starts, by jnana yoga, and he says, whosoever is born is going to die, whether he dies in the battlefield or on his own house, in his own house, he has to die. Jatasya hi dhruva mrityuhu, dhruvam janma mritasya cha, tasmada pariharya arthi nattum shochitum arati. You should not worry about it. Everybody who is born is going to die. And then, he says the next step, and he says, everybody has to do his work. You have to perform your duty no matter who you are. And therefore, the very famous sloka, karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Ma phala karma heturbu mate sangostu akarmani. Don't become inactive. When there is a situation that requires all your help, assistance, and guidance. This is karma yoga. One has to perform his duty. And at the end, he gives the third way, which is accepted by most of the people in India, and that's bhakti yoga. The devotion to the person whom you are, considering your friend, philosopher, and guide. And then he says in one single sentence, man manava, mad bhakto, madhyaji, mam namaskuru. But after saying all these things, I say again and again, he does not give the order. He does not give command. In the last adhyaya, the 18th chapter, sloka number 63, Look what he says. Can you find this kind of explanation by the prophet or the God or the Son of God in any of the book? He says, idam te gnanam akyatam guhyat guhyataram maya vimrushya etat asheshena yatha ichchasi tatha kuru. After going through the entire spectrum, why he should fight? The Lord says, I have told what I thought was the most secret to you. Now you analyze it as you like. Vimrushya, completely asheshena, and then whatever you feel like you do it. I don't mind if you don't want to fight. I don't mind if you go away from the field, but you have to decide. Friends, this is, what we say, explaining everything and then living the opinion to a person. That is at the core of Hinduism. And that's why we have number of, sects, number of, ways of life, and where, there are changes. And after saying at the end, he says, whatever doubt you had in your mind, is it still there? Have I to say 700 slokas again? And then he says, no. Nashto moha smritir labda tat prasadat maya achyuta sthito asmi gata sandeha karishye vachanam tava. Friends, wherever this kind of inclusivism is there, syncretism is there, wherever this kind of pluralistic way of life, karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga is there, I think that is going to remain eternally. Hinduism is a religion, which is evolutionary, not revolutionary. Evolution may take a lot of time, but it is permanent. A monkey has lost the tail and become the man. The tail has gone forever. The revolution, may happen. In France, it happened, and after 2 years, Napoleon came in power. Communism came, and there are so much changes that slowly it is also coming nearer and nearer to democracy. Revolution cannot be as powerful and permanent as evolution. And Hinduism is the best example of evolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Dave. You are an erudite scholar of Bhagavad Gita. You have captured the very essence of Bhagavad Gita, and you have given us the message of Bhagavad Gita. So we are really grateful to you. And this message of the Gita is of perennial significance, and it is not just for the Hindus, but it is for the entire mankind. So we are really thankful to you for this erudite presentation. And now I hand over to Guru Dileepji.
Thank you, Devji. It was beautiful. I know we need more time for Gita, but you made it very short. Thank you. So we have few more short presentations. One is next speaker is Sri Gandhi Kota Adimaji, is advisor for Value Community and Sarvadharma Service Center in New Jersey, USA. Adimaji, floor is for you.
Namaste, sisters and brothers. Salutations to you all. I'm an advisor for the Sat Sai Baba Associated Sarvadharma Service Center in Howell, New Jersey. And we do activities in the local and international communities, including soup kitchen activities, yoga classes, spiritual events, disaster relief, locally and worldwide. So it's a great honor and privilege to be here with you today. Thank you very much, Dileepji, for organizing this meeting. So I'll begin with a prayer, the Gayatri Mantra. Om Bhur Svaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhaggo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonah Prachodayat. And the meaning is, we meditate on the effulgence of our Supreme Lord, who is our creator, inspirer, and source of eternal joy. May this light inspire and illumine our intellect and dispel the darkness. Some teachings of Sri Sat Sai Baba. The whole world is one single tree. The different countries are its branches. The root is God. Human beings are the flowers. Happiness is the fruit. Self-realization is the sweet juice therein. God is the seed of the manifested universe. Everything begins with him. Adore the God that is resident in all beings. That includes man, animals, plants, everything, motivating them and prompting their every activity. God owns everything. We are permitted to enjoy the bounty of the earth, but cannot abuse it. Respect everything. Live in harmony. Live like a yogi. Take the minimum and give the maximum. Love all, serve all. So Swami on the Vedas. The Veda is the mother of all the Shastras. All knowledge is in the Vedas. We just have to understand it. The Veda emanated from God himself as inhalation and exhalation. The great sages who are the embodiments of the treasure gained by long ascetic practices received Veda as a series of sounds and spread it all over the world by word of mouth from preceptor to pupil. Since it was heard and preserved by generations, the Veda is known as Shruti, that which is heard or listened to. The Veda is endless. Who composed the Vedas? Until today, it has not been possible to unveil their names because everything came from the Lord. Those who recited had perhaps no desire to earn renown, for their names are nowhere mentioned in the Veda. They didn't stamp their name in the Veda. Where the sages were masters of all knowledge, for the sense of equality and equanimity found in the Veda is the innate quality of only such wise persons. So it is very appropriate to infer that the Veda was given to the world only by persons endowed with all powers. So we owe a lot to the rishis to follow our dharma. I'm a descendant of sage Bharadvaja. In other words, I am of the Bharadvaja Gotra. For thousands of years, in the face of invasions and strife, our ancestors were able to preserve what was assigned to them, the task of preserving the Krishna Yajurveda, faithfully conducting daily ceremonies, including Agnihotra, and passing on the tradition to pupils. I was born in a Veda Padashala in 1948 in my maternal grandfather's home. It was supported by their own funds and also from land grants given by Maharajas in those days for the upkeep of the Padashala. All this ended in the 1950s after independence. So all through all the invasions and strife, colonials, etc., things went on as they were for thousands of years. But when the new government came in after independence, Hindu temples were taken over by the Indian government. Atheists, communists, non-Hindus were appointed into positions of authority in the temples. Sources of funds for scholarship, schools, padashalas, cultural activities, all dried up. Land reform meant that even the land that was there could be seized by the government. So this is where we are, and we are very grateful that Modi ji has come to perhaps change this slowly. We all have to work towards that. As we said, all humans are on one single tree. So we must be careful. I'll just conclude with a prayer. Samastha lokaah sukhino bhavantu. Samastha lokaah sukhino bhavantu. Samastha lokaah sukhino bhavantu. May all beings in all worlds be happy. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. Namaste and thank you all. May God bless
Thank
all.
you.
Shivoham.
Thank you. Thank you. Very wonderful presentation. Over to Dileepji now.
Thank you, IMAG. That was beautiful. Because of the time limit, we had to go a little faster. I'm going to show one video dance clip from India. Let me see. Yeah, that's only 2.5 minutes.
Very good.
Beautiful. So our next speaker is Reverend Dr. Toshikazu Nagakaki. Is a president of Haiwa Peace Reconciliation Foundation of New York and advisor of Value Community, long-time friend. He does a lot of peace events, interfaith events, and cultural events too. He's originally from Japan, living in New York. Dr. Nagakaki, floor is for you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I hope you can hear me okay, first of all. Oh,
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is my great pleasure to be part of this particular Vedic wisdom and environmental harmony. Sorry, my voice, I don't know, I chant a little too loud or something, but my voice is not completely clear for today. So I hope I excuse my voice first of all. And then thank you again for namaste everyone. Sorry. I think it's very important to say the words. Namaste, thank you for the invitation, and especially Guruji, Dileepkumarji. So it's always wonderful to have such a great events that you have. And then Professor Bat, thank you for all the wonderful speaker lining up too. So I actually enjoy very much for the, listening to the speakers and, learning a lot of ways about Hinduism, especially the Vedic tradition. And so I've been very happy from the beginning. And I try to...
You are going to bring some fire today.
Yeah, that's why I don't know. It's just one of a good place or not, because I'm not really familiar with the Vedic tradition either. So it's a little bit awkward, but yet one of the reasons that I'm here today is because of the part of the, first of all, Guruji asked me to part of it because I'm doing a lot of study, or actually the movement for the swastika, the symbols, as you know. And actually, I wrote the book. This is called the Buddhist swastika and then Hitler's cross. But of course, I wanted to have more like other things too: Hindu swastika, and then the Jain swastika, Native American swastika, the swastika of the world, probably. Because this is one of the ancient symbol, I think, associated with the Vedic time too. So from the Hindu, you probably know better where you find all those swastika in your culture, especially Indian culture. And so even I wanted to start myself for the particular chanting, but I'm not really good at pronouncing the Sanskrit.
Mantra.
So swasti mantra, that's something that
Prajabhya Paripalayandam Nayena Margena Mahimahisha Go Brahmanyabhya Shubhamastu Nityam Loga Samasta Sugino Bhavantu.
Okay, well, thank you so much. So that's the part of the swastika. When I study the research for the swastika, of course, this is particular mantra that we see. And then one other thing is, of course, I encounter all different swastika all over the world, including in this country too. But then first of all, this particular swasti mantra, that I still don't really know what's the Sanskrit exact meaning, but then one of the translation goes, may there be abundance for all, may leaders wisely protect the earth, may there always be well-beings for animals and the wise, may the entire world be joyful. And so if this is a swastika, one of the part of the swastika represent, and then it is actually the environment in talking about the world, the earth itself, animals, everybody, all together. And then the symbol of swastika symbol itself has 4 legs, and which is, for me, is always very interesting. Or is that 4 legs or 4 hands? I don't know. But it's all sort of connected everything's, and so it could be that translated as a four seasons, as an environment thinking, and also four different, the elements that we're talking about many times. I mean, in a Asian tradition too, that like a soil or earth or water, fire, and air or wind and so forth. So those four, the solid, water, fire, and water, air, those are very, very important aspects that we're all talking about. And then it could be all the race too. A lot of racism going on in different country, different colors, and then the white, black, yellow, red, maybe that could be one of the four too. And so, and plus, if you're talking about north, west, I mean the east, west is okay, and the north, south, that's four directions, and then four different continent, maybe you can say, and then the four different direction the people comes together one way. So for me, although because of the Hitler's during World War II, this symbol was abused by the West. And actually, West abused a lot of things in a way. But anyway, so this is one of the symbols that should be very important. Maybe this could be a really environmental symbol. But of course, people might be surprised to see this symbol as an environment symbol. But yet, I feel like that's one thing that's very interesting to be bringing to. And some of the ancient tradition that we have, I mean, I probably not talk about this, but in my mind, always nice to have a lunar calendar instead of solar calendar, because the lunar calendar always sort of associated with the moon, everything's, and then so everything's kind of works the way nicely. Even like some people, I know there's a calendar suggestion before a couple of times before, because the lunar calendar is much more longer history, and then it's all connected to the environments and then the earth itself. But right now, civilization, so-called, or westernization, maybe, that separate from the entire earth system and then how we live. So the moon is probably more it's like 28 days. If you have a 28 days, 12 months, but then actually 13 months equal 364 days. So it works pretty well, and it's very systematic. Every time oh, now is the first day of the month. Oh, it's the no moon, or but then in the middle of the month, and you see the full moon. So you feel like the month itself is working with all the environment or the nature. And then in order to talk about environment itself, I think we should live in a natural setting more. And then so this probably one of the other things that I was thinking as the lunar calendar, but that's a side of my talk. But in a way that but maybe connected, because swastika itself is considered, the right turn swastika could be the sunlight, but then the swastika, the left turn, could be the moon, lunar, the swastika, the light. So it is sort of related in one way. But so that's another interesting system. If you can change totally the lunar system, might be very interesting, Sorry. So as far as this swastika, the recognition is a lot of difficulties. And then I think it's, in a way, the ancient time probably more environment healthy or kind. And so we just have the sense of community, sense of, the balance. And then the swastika itself is really represent a form of a sense of balance. And actually, I'm working on this particular issue for the education on bringing the swastika symbol, especially in a Western country, United States. Even like normally people consider swastika as the most evil symbol ever existed in the world, more like. Because of the Nazi Germany, and then also the white supremacy going on. But it's all have a lot of, what do you call it, taking from the India. The word swastika, of course, from the Sanskrit, and also like Aryan, the white race is also, noble Aryan, the same from the Sanskrit. And then in a way, all words itself is abused in the West. And so, there should be more education necessary for the Western country, what that you're talking about. If you say swastika, should be the good meaning, good luck or, goodness and then virtuous kind of things. So it's kind of interesting things happening in like this world today is really how people are pushing their own view, but not rejecting everybody else. So for me, one thing is this swastika issue bring the dialogue. We need a more dialogue actually among each other. And so that this swastika is a good way. It's not fighting. I mean, for me, it's not like really crushing each other and one or the other, good or bad, like some speaker talk about binary, but rather it's how you can, understand each other, how can create a mutual understanding and a mutual respect based upon the, dialogues and then understanding, proper understanding. So the information is very important. Correct information, very important. Like in this country, the information about the swastika never be up there. Nobody knows what the swastika means other than, Hitler. Swastika equal Hitler, but it shouldn't be. And swastika itself is a non-violence also even, and then sacred symbol of the many religions, especially Eastern traditions or Dharmic tradition. We can probably even use the Dharmic tradition. It's one of the common interface symbol. Existed in this world for many, many years. So there's a very much a valuable symbol. And then as a human being that we're living here, this is a particular symbol, which is one of the very primitive or from original, but also has been here for a long, long time. Like we're talking about 5,000 years, possibly right from the Indian point, 5,000, 3,000, at least those amount of the time people use, and then people really respected this particular symbol. And then that is the also very important aspect of starting with a swasti mantra on Om Swasti. So this particular words itself has really contained all the meaning of the happiness and then bring all the beings, happiness to the all beings, living beings, not only human beings, but entire world today, and then which is a very, very global symbols. And that's what I'm doing. And so I know, are you going to tell me the time? I forgot to be aware what time I started. For detail, of course, I'll be talking about the different things, but maybe one thing is this is educational things. And before, there will be already, the meeting is going on, like starting from the 2007, 2008, and then continue 2010, I believe. But then there's a Hindu-Jewish Leadership Summit, which was held like Jerusalem. And also, what was it? Sorry, the slipped from my mind. That's New Delhi before, and then the Washington D.C. and New York. So there are some meetings going on, but yet it was almost a little stop, like 10 years ago. But then at the education part, I think I just wanted to read the declaration. sorry, Guruji, I can hear you well. Okay, thank you. And the declaration of the this particular conference is, I just wanted to introduce. It says, swastika is an ancient and greatly auspicious symbol of the Hindu tradition. It is inscribed on a Hindu temple, ritual altars, entrances, and even account books. A distorted version of this sacred symbol was misappropriated by the Third Reich in Germany and abused as the emblem under which heinous crimes were perpetuated against humanity, particularly Jewish people. the participants recognize that this symbol is and has been sacred to Hindus for millennia, long before the misappropriation, and then signed by Hindu leaders and then Jewish leaders. But then somehow it stopped there, because this statement needed to be bring into the education system, even in this country, Western country. So that's the one thing. So the one of the reasons I wanted to speak today is that probably it might be nice to start with, of course, this is Hindu symbols, but also all share with Dharmic symbol. And then also it's a part of the Christian symbol, the cross in the middle, that. So for the Hitler, actually he used as a hooked cross, that's a cross symbol. So there is the sacredness of that particular symbols too. So what I'd like to see is possibly centering the swastika, we could have a more dialogue, at least a Dharmic dialogue together, and then maybe expand it to the interfaith dialogue. And so that was my basic presentation that I would like to share with you today. So I thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
So
Thank you very much. In fact, swastika has been one of the most sacred, at the same time most respected symbol of Sanatana Dharma. And etymologically it means Su Asti Karoti. Su means all that is auspicious, all that is beneficial, all that is helpful, all that is conducive to realization of peace, happiness, prosperity, etc. It's an embryonic term, and it has a very vast connotation. And therefore, it is a supreme ideal that we have to pursue. Everyone has to work for wellness. And so swastika stands for the noble ideas and also practices. It's a combination of both theory and praxis. So it's a very significant symbol that we have in Sanatana Dharma, and we are thankful to you for bringing to our notice this particular sacred symbol. Over to Guru Dileepji.
I want to hear from Morgana Sito from Europe. She always care about this type of issues. Morgana.
Yeah, first of all, again, my apologies for not joining in this last weekend. And then I come in and it's exactly at the moment when a couple of weeks ago, for the International Association for Religion and Freedom, I actually gave them one of what they call the motivational dialogues, a talk about religious discrimination and the misappropriation of symbols. And it was within that context that I also talked about the swastika. So how about that for coincidence? I put a link in from a really good BBC Radio 4 radio program, which was actually talking about this whole subject. And I'm based in the Netherlands, and of course in the Netherlands they were very much of course the whole Holocaust, and many Dutch people were killed, Jewish people. So this whole swastika for us in Europe still is very, 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 very tainted. And I remember I was in India in 2000, I don't know, when was it, my first visit in 1977, and I actually found a beautiful gold brooch with a swastika on it. And yet when I came back to the Netherlands, I thought, I can't wear this. I cannot wear this because I would be seen to be a traitor, or so it's taken a long time. At the moment, the swastika is still forbidden in Germany and in Belgium. In the Netherlands, we have a slightly different approach because we have this idea of restoring. We still have this feeling of reconciliation. So we're still, for a lot of the Jewish descendants, still are busy trying to reconcile the horrendous acts of heinous crimes from the Germans, especially the Nazis, of course.
Hakenkreuz.
But in the Netherlands, we still sort of say to ban something actually elevates it. And that's why we see a lot of the neo-Nazi groups, again, using the swastika, and also runes. Runes are also a very well loved kind of misappropriation. But what we see in the Netherlands is it's not banned, but the moment anybody defaces graves in a Jewish cemetery with a swastika, of course, that will be then seen as being a crime because it's inciting to hatred. So again, it's good to talk about these, certainly about the misappropriation of symbols, and it's a conversation which we really need to have, and not be afraid, because we're always going to come across those people who are still using these symbols for something very negative, and, as I say, inciting to hatred. So I just wanted to add now that it's still a very big thing in Europe. And the other thing I want to just mention as well, you mentioned about the lunar connection. And one of the things that I come from a pagan background, and of course our nature religions are basically all lunar religions. So it's quite funny that I joined you at this specific moment. But I loved hearing your talk. It's so important that we are really aware of what is happening and how these symbols can have such an effect on all of us, and music as well.
Thank you so much. Before I forget to say, let me say one thing, because we try to also make it a distinction between the words too, because Hitler never says swastika. He always called Hakenkreuz, hooked cross. He never say, actually only translated as a swastika when they saw the mark, but that itself is also totally misunderstood. That's a cross symbol when they put this, the anti-Semitism coming from the Christian, the part of the background, not the swastika, the Hindu background at all, actually. So it is something. What?
They use a reverse form.
Reverse form, but also the words is also different. Hakenkreuz is a totally different meaning of it.
Many seminal Hindu concepts have been misunderstood and misappropriated in the West. And I think we have to put the record straight also. And one of the objectives of this conference is also to point out what is the essence of Sanatana Dharma or Hindu Dharma, and we have to understand it afresh. We have to revisit the basic ideas and ideals propounded in Sanatana Dharma. Thank you.
I like to ask Professor Balaganapati for his comments or opinion regarding this issue.
Yeah, thank you, Guruji, for asking me, but I don't have any specific comments on this. Yeah. Thank you.
What about Professor Balram Singh?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for asking me. I have a lot of comments on this. So maybe I can. Well, I think, first of all, we should really try to demarcate what is religion and what is dharmic, what is natural, what is spiritual, because this confounding them creates a lot of problem. Now, I don't mean in a bad sense. I mean, religion has a really good value, but that should be just defined as what they are for. And when they delve into the dharma idea, the natural things, the environmental things, then they really are like marketers. They have to, the religion is basically a marketing, it's a branding. There is nothing wrong with that. I mean, we all do that for all products today in economics and other things. So we should appreciate, but not let them, define whatever other things naturally are being done, so that people do not get confused. I think that is really the main issue. So my suggestion is that we should say there should be a dharmic Hindu, like I try to say in that, they could, like Ravana was not a dharmic Hindu, he was Hindu. There is no question about that. That's he was doing everything what a Hindu will do. but he was adharmic, and that is not acceptable. Same way, there should be a dharmic Christian. There should be a dharmic Muslim also. So it's like a scientific, you have a scientific something and you have a non-scientific something. So science is accepted because there's an approach which is a objective, unbiased, detached, systematic, and open to questions and change. That's what the science is defined. So is dharma. I mean, dharma is not somehow, unfortunately, the problem with the people who claim to know dharma, they also do the same thing. They say, well, this is it, this is how it's written. So it should be questioned. I should be able to question or be questioned by even somebody who doesn't know anything about dharma. I mean, people should be able, I'm a chemist and people can ask me all kind of chemistry questions. They don't know anything. That doesn't mean that they have to listen to everything I say, because the idea is to explain to them. I mean, that's how you expand the understanding and knowledge. So you can just see, I can go on and on about this, but I think that's how I feel about it.
Thank you. What about Professor Bhagesh Jha from Gujarat?
Yeah, I think what S.R. Bhatt sir has said, that this is the time that we have to revisit and reinterpret and reinvent. Because like Swastik, as Nagasaki Professor Nakagaki has said that Swastik has been used and misused. Like recently we have seen Hindutva and Hinduism as if they are the opposite words. There is some air of misunderstanding has been created. So I think this is the time where we have to revisit, we have to reinterpret, and logically we'll have to explain to the younger generation. Otherwise, they will be distancing from the religion. They are already distanced. They are not interested in many rituals and all that. So I think spirituality and religion will have to meet somewhere, and we'll have to establish communication with the younger generation with use of technology, of course.
Actually, it has to go hand in hand together, and not separating. Should go together.
Yeah.
I like to hear from Bhuvanesh Koshlaji. We have to do something work in the Western countries to get rid of this problem. Because our duty to bring what is the truth and bring that to the people,
I think the theme is right, and I'll tee off what Dr. Balram Singh was saying, and I think that Professor Jha was also leading. We have to differentiate between dharma and religion. Religion confines us, dharma leads us. And when we talk about the Vedic wisdom and dharma according to Vedas, it is actually very universal. Let's not let the world know that Vedas are for all. It is not for Hindus. It is not for just Christians or Buddhism. These are universal values. When you talk about truth, tell me one person in the world, no matter which religion you're born in, that you can say, I should not speak truth, right? These are universal values. So when we talk about leading a Vedic life, leading a pious life, it's a value system. It's a code for humanity. It is not religion as itself. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a perfect point. Doesn't matter religion or not, we should have ethics and dharma. Nothing else. That's a real core teaching of Hinduism.
Yeah. And also, maybe in addition, I should mention this is a very important symbol for Native Americans. The country here too. So they would like to have more things recognized too.
Yeah.
So those who don't know Miss Morgana Setio, she's the trustee of the URI, United Religions Initiative, which I'm part of the team member at the United Nations.
Oh, so nice to be connected if I can somehow maybe.
Yeah, she worked with Monica, Martha, and all of them.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I was just trying to think of something we just mentioned, Indiology, and I've been following. It's a group called Indica,
Indica.
and they've had some wonderful seminars during the whole COVID period, and it reminded me again of you know, I'm British by birth, although I've been I'm also Dutch at the same time. The influence, of course, of the British in India, of course, is well known. But when I was recently in Calcutta, it was again for me a big reminder of the British influence in India are not always positive. And
Right.
you know, I have to think, oh my goodness, you know, that's part of me, that's part of my cultural background. But it's been interesting to hear. I think there was this, I can't remember his start. He's in New York. Wonderful speaker, talking about the Mahabharata and how it's being reevaluated. But he was also saying that it was very difficult when you have something like such a wonderful bank of knowledge, wisdom, but then to start speaking again, he would say, I would listen to my grandmother. But it was difficult to go into conversation from an academic point of view because he didn't want to insult his grandmother, but was also very much aware of the British influence. So I see this huge dilemma, and we always have this, and that's what I was trying to point out now in the Netherlands as well, and also in England, that there is this huge dilemma. On the one hand, we have the cultural, our parents, we don't want to insult our parents, but sometimes we have to break away. So there's always this huge pull away, which is I always say, you know, it's like this creative dynamism between two poles. And sometimes birthing pains, you know, we do have these birthing pains, but on the other hand, it's a way in which we can learn. But I think the hard thing for a lot of young people is to actually speak to their grandparents, because the grandparents are the ones who still have the repository. And I was reminded very recently in the Netherlands, we have the wonderful Rabbi Abraham Soetendorf. I'm sure some of you will have heard of him. And he's wonderful. He's absolutely, he's such, he's so forgiving. It's just unbelievable. You could say, you know, what's happened to his family. And I think in all of these stories, if we have a way that we are prepared to not just reconcile, but really do it with compassion. And I think this is when we can really have this dialogue. But how difficult it is to, that's why I always say, actually, I think sometimes it's, religion can sometimes get in the way, if you know what I mean. And we have to break our way really to start looking at it from a much more universal aspect. But of course, religion is has a cultural effect on us, and has to do with our ancestors, has to do with our grandparents who may have been connected to conflicts. So I think it's a real challenge. It's really a challenge. On the other hand, I still have the hope, but also I think if we really do look into our own hearts, we cannot fail to be moved. And I think once we're moved, that we then realize how important it is to continue this dialogue. But again, I think, you know, if we lose that hope, or if we lose our way to be compassionate, then we'll just fall into the traps of the demons, you know, the demons who are trying to pull us away from love, you know. And I think that we always say your love will prevail. And, you know, I say I'm an eternal optimist, because I really do think love will prevail through whatever happens. My love for the earth, my reverence for the earth will never change, because I know that if I harm the earth, I'm harming myself. And we do have this, we do have our own golden rule. I think everybody has this golden rule that when often you see this word compassion coming again and again. And I think if we all are compassionate, then we can't really go wrong, you know. So I always hope So we're coming up to Christmas and all these people going on about peace and harmony. And I'm going, oh, for goodness sake, don't forget, you know, what Jesus was trying to tell us, you know, show compassion towards your neighbor, love thy neighbor as thyself, you know. So from a religious point of view, we can have lots and lots of indications, but on the other hand, ultimately, from an ethical point of view, we are responsible for ourselves. And I think that if people are willing to really, really take that on board, that the devil didn't make me do it, I did it all by myself. And that is taking not just the sins for the Father, because I don't believe in the retribution in that sense. We have a responsibility in this life. And I think it is, as long as we really try, then at least we can make this effort which brings us all together. So I hope at Christmas, I hope that people will realize, of course, we have winter solstice on the 21st of December, and it's also coincides with it's very close to the full moon this year. So I hope that everybody will join in our full moon and our winter solstice celebrations, and again remember the returning light, the promise of the returning light. But we still need to do our rituals. We still need to do our the moments of, like, we're having you know, whether it's mantras or a celebration, but celebrating life, I think, is still most important. And love and life. You can't go wrong.
Thank you very much.
That was a beautiful discussion. I know this will continue, because these are the major issues going on around the globe, and we want to make sure everybody equally respected and acknowledged. Most of the time, religion become an organized institution, and the value of the teachings from the master will water it. That's a problem. So we had to keep it as it is, and let people to develop in the superconscious state and go beyond the religion, beyond the barriers. That's the way we had to help people, new generation. Yeah, we try our best. Thank you, Dr. T.K. Nagagaki.
Thank you.
For
Thank you
this
so much.
wonderful
It's been good.
presentation. We did some events last few years. I know we had to do more.
Yeah, now we have some, you know, like a Jewish student who is really studying for this particular parts of it. Also, the movie is coming up this year, also the beginning. So we finished at least the documentary film on swastika. And then, so it's just one by take, like books 10 years ago. So it's a little bit slow, but yet, so maybe another 100 years should be.
So let us see. So I want to thank all of the speakers today, and especially I want to say thank you to Professor S.R. Bhatt sir, and it was late for him in India.
Yeah. Oh,
and,
must be.
Yeah, it's already 10:15 in India PM.
Oh, okay.
And our friends from Argentina and Europe, other places, thank you for joining. We have 4 more days to finish.
Yeah, so we meet tomorrow.
Yeah, we meet
tomorrow. We meet in full strength.
So,
thank you.
And let us have more fruitful deliberation and dwell upon the salient features and seminal ideas of Sanatan Dharma for the wellness of the whole humanity and for cosmic peace and order. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay,
See you
so
tomorrow.
Okay, bye-bye. Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.